Latvia Weekly Interviews with Joe Horgan and Otto Tobuns.
Labdien VCM, and welcome to a very, very special episode of Latvia Weekly for a number of reasons. I am Joe Horgan, your host for the day, and normally for those of you who have listened to the show before, you are used to us talking about the news throughout the week and letting you know what happened here in Latvia. But from time to time, we do interview episodes as well, or we do some episodes about a special topic. And the reason why this is so special is because, first of all together with all the episodes that we've uploaded, this is our 100th episode. And to celebrate, I have invited a extremely special guest onto the podcast because before we were a podcast, we actually, or it was just basically me, I used to kind of write these weekly news updates on this one Facebook group for expats here in Latvia. It's called Expats in Latvia. And it is a very lively and wonderful place to have discussions with other people, both who are local here in Latvia and also who come from other places in the world. And I am joined by no other right now than Mr. Roland Abou Younes. I hope I did not completely butcher your name. I'm sorry about that, but who is the founder and the fearless leader of this expats group. So, Roland, welcome, and how are you today?
Hello. I'm doing well today. It's a pleasure to be with you on this podcast. As a matter of fact, the day you started making the news summaries and then those audio streams like this one, it was a very interesting day for us because finally we started having a good place to get the news from in English, which plus or minus is the international language. I want to thank you for doing that, for taking the effort to do that, and I want to thank you for having me with you today.
Well, thank you for taking the time, and I'm glad that we were able to get some technical issues sorted out, and now we are ready to go. So for those of you who are watching the Facebook Live version of this, you are welcome to ask some questions to either myself, but more particularly to Roland, because a lot of us have spent lots of time on this Facebook group. A lot of the listeners of the show are members of this Facebook group, and if you're not, you should definitely become a member. It's open to just about everyone, right, Roland?
That is true. That is true. Anybody who has interest in the expat community in Latvia, as long as it's an individual, they're welcome to join. Mm-hmm. There are some criteria that we've that we've elicited in the description of the group. We can talk about them at some point.
Yeah, but anyway, we spend a lot of time in this group, but. Roland, actually, you are someone that I've never actually met in real life, and this is the first time I've ever actually talked to you. So I'm very excited about this, because our paths have just never really crossed. So we're going to talk a little bit about you. We're going to talk a little bit about the expat group and kind of especially the role that it's been playing in this very kind of difficult time for everyone here. Some people who are kind of trapped in Latvia right now, or trapped outside of Latvia trying to get home. But let's start with a question which I'm sure you are extremely sick of answering at this point. It's the question that all of us get asked about a million times. So how did you first get to Latvia? Let's just get it out of the way.
Yeah, how did I first get to Latvia? I was in Lebanon minding my own business. I was a practicing executive coach and a mountaineering guide. And then a group of employees of Narvesen come to Lebanon for a team building event. I was the mountaineering guide of that group in Lebanon, and that's where I met my wife, which I have a beautiful 7-year-old daughter with. At that point, it was a choice: either I come to Latvia or she moves to Lebanon. The fact that I have an IT career, which is the same anywhere you go, it makes it very easy for you to get a job anywhere you go. Made it more of a decision that I would move to Latvia. Mm-hmm. Wasn't easy. This might move to the next point, maybe that is very obvious to ask. Why expats in Latvia? Why create this group? The idea is when I came to Latvia, the landing was pretty rough. I would say Latvia is a very beautiful country. Nature is awesome. People are very nice when you know them.
Yeah.
When you don't know people, they tend to keep some distance at the beginning. So from the outside, Latvia sounds a little bit cold, but then when you get in, when you get close to people, it becomes much better. So at that point, I started looking for where I can find people who talk English, people that I can communicate to. That was more or less 2011, after the financial crisis. Most people in Latvia who could talk English at that period had found their way to Ireland or to the UK or anywhere they could go to take care of their families here in the country, to recover from the debts that they picked up from the financial crisis. So it wasn't as easy as now to find people who talk English, locals. And also expats, I wasn't very familiar with the expat community, and there was no way to get in touch. So at that point, I did push forward for some communities in Latvia, like Toastmasters. We started Toastmasters during that period. We started TEDx Riga during that period. It was more of a TEDx Riga salon where we just watch TED Talks and have conversations. The main concept behind it was to meet people who talk English.
Yeah.
And that's how I started getting in touch with other people who are familiar with, have a little bit more familiarity with expats. And at some point, I decided to look for a group on Facebook called Expats in Latvia. I couldn't find it. So I decided to create that group.
Yeah. And then the rest is history, because now, as of the latest count, there are more than 3,500 members of the expat group, and it kind of increases and decreases every so often. But it has been steadily increasing. And from what I understand, at least the current iteration was founded in 2012. So we're coming up on a decade of this group being in existence. And with Facebook being such a big part of people's lives, you know, it is definitely a very important place where people share information and all kinds of different things. So about this idea of being an expat, I kind of want to get into. I want to get into a slightly little philosophical question, I guess, right now. So you were talking about how it was difficult at the beginning to find other people who speak English, and be able to make kind of like contacts with people and be able to kind of create this community at first. One very common complaint that I hear from expats here in Latvia is that it's very difficult to find people who don't want to talk to you in English, because for a lot of people, they want to practice their they want to practice their English with foreigners, and for people trying to learn Latvian, they kind of get frustrated about this. And so what I want to ask you, well, there's a few things I want to ask you, but what I want to start with is, what do you think is the correct balance between kind of being an expat, spending time with other international people, taking advantage of the fact that we're living somewhere that we weren't born in, and that we have access to all these kind of, this community of other people from all over the world. How much time should we spend with other expats, do you think, compared to how much time should we spend trying to assimilate and spending time with local people here? So what do you think about this balance?
Well, I'll get to your point. I will start with one step before that. The expats group was not created to create a subculture, to create an expat community that would stay an expat community. That's not what I stand for, I would say. Yeah. There's a very interesting saying, a Sufi saying, actually. It says, "Be the spirit of the land you stand on." As in, wherever you are, adopt the spirit of that place, the raison d'être, the why this place exists, and become that, be part of that. So the group was not created to create a subculture. The group was created mostly at that point to meet some other people who are facing those same issues I was facing at that period, who could probably share their experience and make it easier. Learn from each other's mistakes rather than repeating the same mistakes, each and every one of us, and maybe be able to meet every now and then and talk and have someone to relate to. But it was never the intention to make it a final destination for expats. Yes, there are expats who are coming for a month, 2, maybe 3. Some people are coming for a project, 6-month work, and they don't want to become part of the overall community in the country, and that's understandable. Those might not want to mix too much, but I would say they would be missing on a little bit of the culture. The right amount of time spent with expats is the same amount of time you'd spend with your therapist, I would say. Practically try as much as you can to spend time with the community to learn about Latvia. It's a very beautiful country. If we keep calling ourselves expats and create an identity out of that, we would be isolating ourselves. And by being part of the community, by bringing whatever is special in us into the society, we're enriching Latvia, making it a little bit more diverse, giving it a little bit more of a external flavor, a little bit more of an extra spice, I'd say. So it helps the country from one side, and it helps us bring our experience to the society, to the community, to this nation that hosted us and accepted us. But I don't want to be obnoxious to how hard it is to integrate in Latvia. As I said in the beginning, landing in Latvia is not so easy. Latvia is not Berlin. It's not a cosmopolitan country. Now, Riga is much more international at this point in time, but there were times where Latvia was not as easy to land in as today, but still the society. As I said, Latvians on the outside, they sound a little bit cold, but when you get closer, when you make friends, they're real friends. They're pretty close. And they're people you can trust if you establish that bond with. People are people everywhere. So the right amount of time to spend with the expats is enough time to ask a couple of questions about Latvia, to answer a couple of questions, to pay back to this place that you're learning from and help others. But it's not a final destination. It's a transition. It's the same. I mean, think of it like the airport. It's cool in the airport. It's nice, but you don't live in the airport.
Unless you're Edward Snowden, maybe for
That's different.
Oh man, I love that. I'm going to use that from now on. I'm going to steal that quote all the time, that you should spend the same amount of time with expats as you spend with your therapist, because I completely agree with you on that, because I have a kind of a similar philosophy, and I know that different people are here for different reasons, and there obviously isn't kind of one universal right answer, but I completely agree with what you said, and that's a very very eloquent way to put that. So speaking of this, this is one of the topics that comes up very often on the expat group is how do you go about kind of becoming acclimated with Latvian culture, assimilating with Latvian culture, and you've pointed out that it is difficult compared to in other places, and there's a lot of reasons for this, which we could spend an entire episode talking about, the kind of the cultural reasons why, Latvian people are a little bit more reserved than, in southern nations. But what have you found? What could you advise, for example, to people who are having a difficult time integrating with Latvia, who might be getting discouraged? What kind of practical things have you found are useful for kind of getting used to this culture and meeting people and making friends and things like that?
Okay, what made it easier for me, I would say, is that I could find a job in technology very easily. And technology is the place where it's the same job wherever you go. And there's quite a bit of Nordic organizations and international organizations in the country. So the job helped me a lot because it allowed me to bring in value to this community that I'm part of, which is that workplace that I joined. That made it easier for me to deliver that value that I have in a language that I'm comfortable with. So target international companies, try to find a job in one of those companies. The main shock, if you want to, for an expat when you move to a country that you don't know the language of, that you're not comfortable with the culture and you don't know the culture yet, is that you come from a place where you have value, where you can add value to society. Mm-hmm. You come from a place where you have a lot of energy that you can share, but then suddenly you're in a new place where all that value that you can add is bottled up and you have no way to share it with people around you. On the other hand, people around you appreciate you for the value you add to their life.
Yeah.
And if you cannot release that, it will only make you feel more frustrated because others are going to look at you with the expectation that you have nothing to give. So I would say a job is definitely a very good place to start. Finding a job, preferably in an environment where you can add real value. So if you can find a job in an international company where the communication language is English, this would definitely help a lot. On the other hand, don't be too harsh on yourself. Expect that this will take some time. Since we started comparing to the airport, don't rush the queue. If you rush the queue, you might end up in trouble. So what I would say is take your time. And if it's not coming as fast as you thought it would, take a break, come back to the expats group, talk, be as friendly as you can be, have some compassion, try to think of why are people, anytime somebody's being aggressive with you or somebody's blocking you out, usually it's fear. Mm-hmm. Now, if you try to ask yourself, what could be causing this fear? You'll get a lot of insight. Ask why, what are people afraid of? And then you'll get to know. Mm-hmm. Once you understand what people are afraid of, next step would be to try to make your intro by highlighting that you are not those scary things people are afraid of. And focusing on how you can add value. It always helps. It always allows people to find the common ground, find a place that they can talk to you about. And again, if you're coming to a family like my case, which the family of my wife was very welcoming. Mm. Yes, there was not many, her family, her friends, they're very welcoming, but in many places, neither they nor I knew what are the common subjects to discuss. And in some cases, the language was different. So if somebody's being a little bit reserved, it's probably because they're afraid to try to talk in a language that they don't know and sound silly. It's like being an expat within your country. Like you suddenly, all your language skills are useless because you don't know English. You don't have to do that if you're a local. So you try to, another thing I would recommend, you try to understand what are people afraid of and to try to easen up the path there. And on the other hand, for the language, trust me. Labrit, kayet, those two expressions are more than enough to make any Latvian smile. Learn a couple of words, learn a couple of sentences, try to talk when you can. Even if you sound silly, people will laugh. When people laugh, they're no longer afraid.
Mm-hmm.
People will laugh, you'll ridicule yourself a little bit, it will build up that bond. And why did I say find a job where you can talk English, but in social setting, try to talk Latvian? Because in your job, you want to add value, you want to establish your value, you want to get something back from it. This is your subsistence, this is what's going to keep you going on long term. But in a social setting, that's where you can learn, that's where you can make fun of yourself. At a job, if you're managing a team, you need to make sure that you're taken seriously, so that whenever you're addressing something that needs to be delivered, you will be taken seriously and you'll be able to deliver it. But at home, leave the ego out of it. Just make fun of yourself, make a joke, try to talk. Even if you don't know the sentence, sometimes I change my opinion based on the words I know.
Mm-hmm.
Get in a taxi car. Taxi drivers usually are very open to have conversations. Talk to them. I've had a political conversation in a taxi car where I expressed the opposite opinion to what I really believe, simply because those were the words I knew. Mm-hmm. You're not going to change the world in that conversation, but maybe you'll change your life a little bit by having that conversation. The other thing is the world is, your experience of the world is how you perceive it. Mm-hmm. So what you set your focus on defines your experience of the world. Yes, you cannot change physics with wishful thinking, but you definitely can change your mind. You definitely can change your mood. You definitely can wake up in the morning and feel like you can change the world that day, and then it will make your life much better. And in the scenario where you start asking yourself some of those questions that say, oh, I'm being discriminated against, or people are treating me bad, step back, go back to, in your thoughts, go back to your country, to how your country treats people, and you will realize that maybe in your country, it's not much better, mm-hmm. and that everywhere people are the same. Everywhere people have fears, and try to allow for those fears to express themselves, rather than judging the whole society based on one person who's radical, or one person who's a little bit ultra nationalist, or one person who's a little bit racist. Mm-hmm. No, remember that wherever you are, there are those people. And there are the people that you would love to sit and have a conversation with. Another thing is, if you're working in a work environment, you'll find more sane people. If you're working in a startup, you'll find more sane people. By sane, I mean people who have a target, who have a purpose, who are looking to find someone with a common interest that they could build the conversation with, and then based on that, maybe have a project on the long run. It allows you to find people who care to communicate, rather than trying to connect with people who don't have interest. It's different. On the long run, if they don't have interest in you right now, because they cannot talk to you, on the long run, when you can talk the language, and that's important at some point, you'll be able to connect to people, you'll be able to have conversations with people, and those people who you think you can't talk to now, think of it like a computer game. Mm-hmm. It's a level that you haven't unlocked yet. When you learn the language, suddenly you can talk to more people. When you know a little bit about the culture, suddenly you can talk to more people. When you realize that talking about Soviet Union and Russian versus Latvian is getting you blocked from conversations, or is giving you aggressive communication, you realize that those are subjects that are very sensitive for this specific community, and you try to avoid them unless you have enough knowledge to be constructive. So there are certain subjects in each country, in each culture, that are sensitive for the country due to some history. So when you learn about those subjects, don't come and shove them in people's face. Try to be more. If you don't know the background, you will sound tone deaf.
Yeah. Well,
it's like talking. Yeah, it's like talking color in the United States.
Oh, geez.
If you don't know enough, you will step on people's toes right and left.
Yeah.
It's like talking about microsensitivities in Canada. If you don't know enough, you will end up making a clown out of. A clown would be good. You'll make a monster out of yourself because people are not gonna know how much you don't know, and they're gonna assume that you know, but this is your opinion. So it's my advice is be sensitive, avoid those subjects until you know enough. When you know enough and you're talking to people who are aware enough, you can have those conversations, but not on entry.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you know what I usually recommend. So every year I kind of give like a little talk to the Fulbright students who come to America. So it's this program where students come for like 1 year and they teach English. It's how I came to Latvia in the first place. I always tell them, and this is kind of what you're talking about, that about these sensitive issues, just listen as much as possible, because as I'm sure you had the same experience, you know, when it comes to these very sensitive issues, you hear one person give a very, very strong opinion. You think, oh, okay, wow, you know, that's how it is. Then you hear somebody else give an extremely strong opinion, completely opposite. And you go, wait, what? You know, well, one of them's wrong, one of them's right. And then you hear like almost a completely third opinion about it. And you're like, well, wait a minute. And then you start to get the full, more complicated picture. And yeah, at least for me personally, and I'm guessing you probably kind of feel the same way. I like to try to stay out of these sensitive issues unless somebody specifically kind of asks my opinion, because I don't know. How do you feel? I still feel, so I've been here for almost 7 years now, and you've been here obviously longer than me. I still feel a little bit like I'm a guest. Like even though I'm going to live here the rest of my life and everything, like I still have this attitude that I'm still kind of a guest, and you know I have to be kind of more respectful than I would be, you know, in my home state, where I feel like I can kind of say however, you know, whatever I want. Do you feel the same way, or is this just me?
You're right about this. I see it the same way, but I would not go as far as saying I'll forever be a guest. My daughter is Latvian, and I cannot call myself a guest forever here.
Yeah.
What I would say is, I would not touch on those subjects because I don't know enough.
Yeah.
Or if you want to, when you know enough about the context, at this point in time, I feel very comfortable talking about those specific subjects, because especially if the person knows how to talk English and they're comfortable and they can understand English. And after I get to know a thing or two about the person, and I know that they're not radical or that they're not traumatized, like extremely traumatized, that they have a little bit of flexibility, I can have those conversations.
Yeah.
Do I still believe that I should be polite? Yes, I do believe I should be polite anywhere. Even in my country, I should be. If I'm thinking Lebanon, I will still be polite in Lebanon all the way through. But if there's a tough conversation taking place, and I know that the people who are involved in this conversation are flexible enough, are open enough, I would say are solid enough, I would have that conversation, and I would have even tough opinions to be communicated, and I will hold my ground in those conversations. But before having those conversations, don't go pick up someone who's at a point in their life where they don't want to learn anything new.
Yeah.
Don't force openness on someone who's beyond that point. Always think, what's the point from this conversation?
Yeah.
If the conversation is for sports, But by that, I mean, it's a form of a debate club. Yes, sit and have the conversation all the way through. Now, don't have that conversation with your boss. Yeah. Don't have that conversation with your employees. Don't have that conversation with your wife's family. Don't have that conversation with a friend.
Mm-hmm.
Make those mistakes that you need to make, because that's how you're going to learn. After you make those mistakes, you'll be smarter.
Yeah.
You'll know a little bit more. There are certain subjects that better learn about, better practice them in a safe environment, then you can talk about them. And I would say if you're planning to stay in Latvia on long term, do look at Latvia from a perspective of someone who wants to become part of the society. Yes, you have gratitude for the society, but it doesn't mean that if there's something wrong, you should just accept and move on.
Mm-hmm.
If there's someone that's being treated wrong, no, you are human first before you become American or before you become Latvian at some point. You're human first. So your loyalty first is for humanity. At least that's the way I see it. We're all brothers in humanity, brothers and sisters in humanity. That's first and foremost. We're all equal, at least so I believe, and that's something I'm willing to stand for.
Yeah.
And we're all free to do whatever we want to do, as long as it doesn't step on the first 2 points.
Mm-hmm.
As long as it doesn't step on somebody else's humanity or on the fact that we're all equal.
Yeah. Wow. There's just so many great quotes that you're like just a factory of great short little quotes that I could just, turn into a Facebook post or something or put on my classroom wall. So anyway, I want to.
I was an executive coach at some point, so I used to live on those.
I can tell. You're just an absolute pro. You're amazing. I want to go back to this idea. I want to take a few questions from listeners. So we have a few questions the listeners have written in, and I want to ask those. But before we do, going back to this idea of conversation and kind of having this debate club and what's the point of this conversation? So this is, as anybody who has spent any time on the Expats group knows, from time to time, there have been some very controversial discussions, about all kinds of different things, especially lately about COVID-19, because it's an issue that people feel very strongly about in different ways. And of course, there are some people who it's obvious, at least, from my perspective, that, some people are looking to start some kind of fight. Some people, just like to watch the world burn. But on the other hand, there are a lot of people who do want to have these kind of, just discussions for honest reasons as well. And this makes it very difficult for you as the administrator of the group to decide, how far do you want these kind of conversations to progress? And, because it has gotten nasty before, it definitely has gotten nasty. It's gotten personal. So I think I have a pretty good idea of your philosophy as a moderator. But I would like to hear kind of what do you think is the role of a good moderator for a discussion group like this? What are the kind of comments that should be deleted? How far does free speech go in this kind of community? So how do you see your job as a moderator, as an administrator?
I'll start with people want to have those conversations. There's a place and there's a time for things. If I want to have a conversation in which I want to play the devil's advocate and pretend to be racist, or maybe provoke someone else and have them lose their mind over the conversation, yes, you can do that. It's definitely possible. Set up a meeting with the person, go sit face to face in person, so that if you piss off the other person far enough, you'd know that you might get a punch, which I don't recommend. But if you really want to be that provocative, do it in person. Don't hide behind the keyboard.
Yeah.
Now that's first. But second, if you want to hide, that's fine. You can set up a conversation with that person and have that conversation with them in a private chat. If you're doing it for fame, if you're doing it for the ego, if you're doing it to collect as many supporters as you can, there's the elections for that. It's not expats in Latvia. Expats in Latvia, I think my role in expats in Latvia is less of a founder, more of a curator for this community. I did not make the group grow to 3,500 or 200, or I don't know what's the number today, but I didn't make it grow to that number. It's not me who went and made people join. People join for their own purposes. And as long as your purpose from joining expats in Latvia is to make your life easier, to learn something that's useful for you in your stay in Latvia, to maybe find a way to find your voice and contribute to society in Latvia, to learn the things that you don't know. For those purposes, this community is perfect. If the question is well-intentioned and it got relatively rough, usually I let it go. The situations where I would delete a post and mute a user is when that user has lost respect for the others. When a user uses disrespectful language, direct or indirect. You don't have to say bad words to be disrespectful. There are a lot of ways and you don't even need to lie to insult others or to be disrespectful to others. You can say the truth with bad intent, and it will cause as much damage as you can imagine. So what you need to look at is, and sometimes you can be ignorant and cause damage. You could be tone deaf and not know what it sounds like. So the same sentence could be said by two people in different contexts, and in one context it should be stopped, and in one other context it can be left alone. What I try to do is, if there's profanity of any kind, if there's flagrant disrespect, I will take action on it by I try to take the action proportional to what was done. So if somebody seems to have done a mistake, muting this user for 24 hours or 48 hours or maybe even 7 days is doable. But if somebody is intentionally trying to be racist or trying to start a fight right and left and insisting on continuing with it, in those scenarios, I would rather block the user and end the day. This is one side of it. What keeps it calmer usually is that one thing maybe that I didn't communicate in the group description is that if a user has a profile that's less than 1 year old or maybe less than 2 years old, I usually don't allow that user in the group. Most of the cases, a user that's less than 2 years old, I would say in 90% of the cases, it's either a fake profile or a profile created by a business to represent the business, or somebody who just created the profile for a target. If you have a profile on Facebook, even if you're advertising, if you created a profile on Facebook that's 4 or 5 years old, you are going to do what your intent is to do, but you're not going to do it in a way that's cheap, which is not disrespectful to others. There's plenty of scripts that create users and make those users crawl Facebook and join groups and send advertising, but most of those are less than 4 years old. So if a user has a username that's bigger, an account that's older than 4 years old, usually they think twice before they try to mess with that user. This is one side of it. The other side of it is, if you have friends in the group, you tend to be more respectful in the group. If you have someone who invited you to the group, you tend to be more respectful in the group. And those are things that you notice. So filtering from the requests to join the group, there are multiple criteria that we go through before accepting a request, and that helps a lot. The next step is profanity, flagrant disrespect, yes. In the scenario where somebody is picking up one of those very sensitive conversations that could be very provocative, especially in a time where people are tense. I'm talking in the scenario of everybody's losing their mind over what's happening with COVID. And then next thing you see is somebody bringing COVID as a pretext to throw shade on the government, to turn the conversation to nationalist Latvian versus USSR, the whole fight that we're so familiar with by now. If somebody's coming to push it in a place where people are very tense, it's not the right thing to do. I'm not saying it's not a discussion we can have. I'm fine with having this discussion if we can keep it civilized in context. So if somebody comes to talk about the interaction between the Russian-speaking community in Latvia and the Latvian community in Latvia, you could probably have that conversation if you're delicate about it. You could even talk about what happened before during the Soviet Union, how that caused some fears, and why it causes those strong reactions, and why some people confuse Russian speaking with Soviet Union or with the Russian government, which are two very different things. Which is why some people might confuse a Russian-speaking Latvian with somebody who was here during the Soviet Union with the intention to be part of the the Soviet army. Those are things people can confuse, but they shouldn't be confused. So if you can keep the conversation to a mature level, by all means have it, but you're treading on soft ground. You might, on soft ice, you might crack the ice and then you'd end up in the water. And in those scenarios, rather than letting it go into a place where everybody's being offended, I would rather stop that conversation.
Yeah.
And Facebook helps a lot. It gives us quite a bit of tools in terms of flexibility to address certain matters. If you click on a user's profile, on a user's username, you can see all the posts they've posted in the group, which allows you to have some context of the character of this person, maybe this person's intentions in the group. It's not easy because there's a lot of assessment of intentions and character in it. But on the other hand, I don't pretend to be perfect. I know that in some cases I've been rougher than I should have. And in some cases I've been a little bit more lenient than I should have. But I do my best within the circumstances.
Well, you definitely have my full faith, because I think you've been doing a great job of moderating it, and I think that most people would agree with that. But I do want to, now that we're starting to kind of run out of time, I do want to finally get to some listener questions. And speaking of these kind of controversial topics that people have been getting into the Facebook group. So going right off of that theme, so one question from our listener was, do you make a difference between relations with Latvians and Russians here? So this is kind of on the edge of one of these kinds of difficult.
So do I like Latvians more or do I like Russians more?
No, I think what he's asking is like, do you like, is there a difference? Like, do you relate to people differently? Do you kind of communicate with people differently, like the Russian speaking community here and the Latvian speaking community here, or is there less difference than people think? Maybe I think at least that's what he's trying to ask.
In the Facebook group or in reality in life with people?
Well, either. Let's go with reality. Let's go.
Yeah. The more you know about the cultural background the more you can choose your words wisely. But I wouldn't say Russian community, Latvian community. I wouldn't put it in that big block. I would say that what people refer to when they say Russian community, probably they refer to the Latvians who speak Russian. What I would want to say there is, within that community, I have some very good friends that I really respect. And I have people that are very close to me, and I even ask for advice when necessary. And I work with, and in the Latvian community, the same. And in both communities, there's that one uncle that you don't want to talk to, whether Russian or Latvian or Russian Latvian or Latvian Russian. There's those people that in each community give a bad reputation for the community. There are some expats you don't want to talk to.
Definitely.
We're not going to make expats angels here. So in each community, there are people who give the community a good name. There are people who give the community a bad name. And there are those in the middle, and there are those who don't relate to the community in any way, but they just got the name on them because they happen to be born in that place. Yeah. So I'd rather not judge or not affect my communication with people before I know more about them individually. I would say between different people, my conversation, I would still stand for the same principles, but I would choose the words that I would communicate in a different way. So no, it's not directly Russian-Latvian split. It's more open-minded versus close-minded character on both sides, on all sides. It's more somebody who's flexible and articulate and can talk and communicate openly, and somebody else who probably doesn't feel so comfortable with the language. So yes, we should be sensitive. Yes, it helps when you know someone's background. If you know that someone's father was exiled from Latvia, sent to a labor camp, you would know where to keep your silence, or where to be more sensitive, or where, if that person is a little bit radical, where you would allow yourself to understand the context, to understand the background, and maybe give them some slack there. Or if somebody's parents were isolated from society completely after the Soviet Union, were judged to be Russian, while in reality they're as Latvian as can be. Or maybe they moved to Latvia for studies, but then after the Soviet Union collapsed, they ended up being treated like they are the enemy. You also need to tread lightly with those people. There are people who contributed to society and pushed as much as they could value into society, but still got treated bad. They got the wrong side of the stick, simply because they were labeled wrong. So maybe our job here is to be considerate and to avoid labeling, because the moment I come and label Russian, Latvian, I'm being part of the problem. So better meet the person, know the person, talk to them. Once you know them a little bit more, you'll be able to have much more understanding in which direction to take things. But there are plenty of things other than Russian speaking or Latvian speaking that if you know about a person, if you want to be judgmental, they'd allow you to be more educated in your judgment. Education, profession, values in life, experience, exposure, all of those change a person to a point where they do not relate to where they were born in any way. But definitely I can learn from somebody who lived in a Russian-speaking community. I can learn from them things about their culture. I can learn from somebody who lived in a Latvian-speaking community. I can learn more about their culture, and it would help me a lot. It would help me a lot while relating to a colleague at work. It would help me a lot while relating to a partner.
Yeah. Wow, I wish we had like another entire hour, and I'm gonna have to bring you on the show again at some point. I'm gonna have to just meet you at some point because I'd love to just sit back and just have some tea for like like a couple hours. But we're gonna have to wrap up with a couple more questions, and one kind of Latvia related question, because I want to end with some kind of like Latvia related questions. So one of our listeners has asked, and I just lost the question right now. Yes, they wanted to know if Latvia is more safe than living in other EU nations. So I think kind of what they're going for is like how safe is living in Latvia compared to other countries.
It depends on what type of safety you're talking about, but Latvia is relatively safe. I would say in Latvia you can. I would say in 99% of Latvia, you could go walk on the street, dressed in any way you like, if you have a fancy car, with your fancy car, with your Rolex watch if you have one, if you're lucky enough to have one. I don't. But if you do, you can wear your Rolex and go walk on the street at midnight, and nobody would say a word to you. You'd not be in trouble. So is Latvia safe? Yes, Latvia is really safe. From that perspective, is it safer than other European countries, depending which country you're talking about and which region in which country you are? And with the right mindset, I would say you're safe everywhere. Mm-hmm. I know people who are reporters who go to war zones, and they still tell you, "I'm safe because I know the context."
Yeah.
So. Yeah.
Yeah, I would just like to make clear, Latvia Weekly does not endorse the idea of walking around at midnight with a Rolex watch and a fancy car, as I'm sure that Roland would not either. But no, it's completely true. I mean, I've almost never I've almost never felt unsafe at any time really in Latvia, when it comes to that kind of stuff. But of course, I mean, anywhere in the world, you never know what happens. There can be a crazy person in the forest. So, I completely agree. Yeah. So to kind of wrap up a little bit, so you've been here for how many years exactly? I think you already said, and I just have a terrible memory. How many years?
I came on November 2011. Mm-hmm. So that's 9 years now.
Okay. Yeah, so basically almost a decade at this point. And, of course, yeah, you have a family here, and, that's a big motivation to stay. But obviously, you like the country quite a bit, just like I do, just like most of us do in the Expats group. What are some of your favorite things about living in Latvia?
My favorite things about living in Latvia, I love the wild forest in Latvia. I love that Latvia is, I don't know if my statistics are correct. I'm just bringing them from the top of my head. 80% forest, I would say. If you look at it from the top, it's all green. It's not 80. It's not 80.
Yeah, I think it's like 53, 54, something like that. Yeah, but it's a lot. Okay. It's a lot.
But wherever you go, there are trees. There's wilderness. There's everything, and that's really beautiful. That's something that most of the world has lost, and we have it. If we look at people being distant, you're lucky people are distant. Even Corona couldn't penetrate, which is really good. We're lucky to be here.
Yeah.
Latvia is a country that is not as volatile as the rest of the world. Mm-hmm. So in Latvia, people are mature. People, to a certain extent, do act respectfully. People judge themselves pretty harshly. Latvians, by default, judge themselves pretty harshly on their behavior, on how they do things. So if a Latvian, if you're making a joke in any country in the world and you tell someone that they're driving too fast, they'll brag about it. If you mention to your Latvian friend that you saw him driving fast, he'll try to get his way out of it. He'll try to tell you that he wasn't driving. It's like people have respect for the law in Latvia. Yeah. Now, again, there are pluses and minuses. There are people who don't respect the law also in each country. But what I'm saying is Latvia is a country where people are very respectful of the rules to a certain extent, which allows it to be less volatile than the rest of the world. So it adds to the safety from a political standpoint. From a social stability standpoint, the fact that there are not many people in Latvia, almost everybody knows everybody, makes everybody wants to look their best, makes everybody wants to be respectful. Because if you've been in Latvia for long enough, you know that every person you're gonna meet on the street, they're 2 people away from someone you know very well.
And you have to be very careful of that too, because I've gotten in trouble with that before. Because you never know, like if you make some comments like, "Oh, I don't really like that guy" or whatever, you could end up meeting them and becoming friends with them, and you just never know.
So yeah, it's a beautiful country. I love that anybody can become a politician in Latvia.
Yeah.
If you're genuine about it and you put the effort, and people see that you're respectful, you can become a politician in Latvia and be part of the system. And anybody who tells you Latvia is racist, I would tell them, look at the politicians in Latvia. There are some expats just like you who became ministers in Latvia. There are a lot of people who hold very, very, very eminent positions in the corporate, in the industry, in the corporate world in Latvia. Who are expats. There are a lot of people who come from an outside country and run a business in Latvia and decide to stay in Latvia because Latvia is not racist. Yes, if you think Latvians are a little bit distant, they're not distant from you because you're an expat. Latvians are distant. They treat each other the same, which means it's not racism.
Yeah,
it's culture. It's the way people like to live their life, and we should be respectful of that. And if you wanna meet someone after 5 minutes, hug and scream and shout with each other, probably look for an expat from a southern country. It makes it more lively. I mean, you don't go to a basketball court and play football. It doesn't work.
Yeah,
it's just a different game. No offense, it's just a different game.
How do you crank these out? You don't go to the basketball court to play football. You just shove these out. I don't know. I want to finish up with just some fan mail that you've gotten during the course of this interview. So one of our listeners says that they are mesmerized by you and they hope that you write a book someday. And I completely agree. I would definitely buy that book. We have some Paul Diaz for explanations. One person said that you have very wise words, very good idea to make the group for expats here. Another person said that they have learned some Latvian words, and yes, he's right, they work like magic. I can also completely agree. My very first level of Latvian I call party trick Latvian, and it's fantastic. Because you can just pull these words out off the top of your head. It's not true for anyone, unfortunately. For people who've lived here their entire life, I'm sure you've noticed that Latvians are very critical of language ability. Even regardless if you're a native speaker or not. Getting a job is a very good way to mix things up. Just a few more people thanking you for your experiences and sharing with them with us, and thank you so much for spending an hour with me here on this lovely. What day is it today? What is it? Tuesday? Or Wednesday?
It's Wednesday.
It's Corona Day. Yeah. Well, where are you, by the way, right now? So you're in Sarnikava.
Yes, I'm currently in Sarnikava. This is where I live at this point. I lived in Riga for all my stay in Latvia, but then I moved to Adaji for my daughter's school, and Sarnikava, Adaji, that's my whereabouts for the past 1 year.
Yeah.
I want to thank you, Joe. I want to thank you for hosting this show. I want to thank you for bringing the news to us in English, for bringing some actualities about what's happening in Latvia to us in English. I'm saying it again because I genuinely mean it, and I see value in it, and I myself follow up on it. I want to thank all the listeners for the comments, all the positive comments and the compliments. I would even welcome not so positive comments. I would recommend on private in chat so we can get the chance to have a conversation over them. I would say negative comments or criticism are what make us wiser along the way. And positive is what builds up energy in us and makes us feel that we're doing something right and keeps us going to do more. It would be my pleasure to talk at any point in time. 1 hour is definitely not too much to give back. It would be my pleasure to talk at any point in time on any subject you or any of the listeners choose.
Well, we will definitely be having you back again in the future. And again, once all of this crazy corona crisis is over, we will definitely need to meet up in real life sometime. And I hope to see you here in Jelgava sometime. Tsarnikova is nice. I would not mind going back there. But anyway, thank once again to everyone for listening. So if you would like to hear our normal weekly episode where we talk about the news, you can hear Otto, Olevs, and Carlos talk about it tomorrow. I will be behind the scenes producing, kind of getting Otto ready for taking the show over when I'm gone on my paternity leave for a month from the show. So please, if you like the show, please like our Facebook page, subscribe in your favorite podcast app or YouTube. And until the next time we meet, Visu Labu VCM.